New to BBC World, award-winning reporter Michael Cockrell examines Britain's relationship with other nations, beginning with our nearest neighbour, France, with friends like these.
This series looks at Britain's relations over the years with our three key allies, France, Germany and the USA. Part 1 focuses on the Anglo-French Entente, two countries which for centuries have been the best of enemies.
It goes back a long way. The Duke of Wellington said that we shouldn't really be happy unless we were detested in France. And Napoleon, for his part, used to refer to the perfidious English.
We are fascinated by Great Britain, and also with a bit of repulsion. That's a mix of both feelings.
You only have to mention the word France in front of a British political audience, and you will achieve an astonishing reaction.
If you were God and you were trying to create a nation with characteristics which would most get up the British nostril, it would probably be the French.
L'attelage poursuit sa route dans la bonne direction. Alors de temps en temps, il y a un petit mouvement.
Ce que j'ai appris aujourd'hui, c'est qu'il y a beaucoup plus de choses qui nous unissent que de choses qui nous divisent. C'est tout. Merci.
For nearly 1,000 years, the British and the French have lived together, fought alongside and against each other, in one of the most complex and fascinating love-hate relationships between two countries.
I think looking at it historically over centuries, it's a kind of family relationship. So there's no escape from our relationship with France. It's not optional. We are part of them, they are part of us, almost literally, because of the nature of our history. And so when there are rows, the rows are within the family, so all the more intense because there can be no escape from them.
Tony Blair had come to power as the most francophile of British prime ministers. Until this summer, he'd holidayed every year in France. And he was more at home with its language than any of his post-war predecessors in number 10.
J'ai travaillé en France il y a 20 ans. Et bon, je passe mes vacances en France, j'ai plusieurs amis.
Monsieur le Président, je crois fermement que ce grand projet que nous avons conclu aujourd'hui, espérons que nos ouvriers, nos entreprises, nos nations se lèveront à sa hauteur.
Je suis convaincu que nous vivons un moment historique comparable à celui d'il y a 20 ans, car il est certain que les décisions que nous prendrons tous dans les semaines à venir seront déterminantes pour l'avenir politique de l'Europe.
Messieurs et mesdames, prenez garde. Je vais parler français.
Winston Churchill loved France, but his wartime relationship with the French leader General de Gaulle was vividly symbolic of the tensions inherent in the Entente. As Churchill told Parliament, the good Lord in his wisdom did not see fit to create the Frenchman in the image of the Englishman. As the Nazis threatened to overrun France in 1940, de Gaulle, who was then a French government minister, came to London with a remarkable plan. The idea was that France and Britain would no longer be two nations, but would join together in an indissoluble union with common foreign, defence and financial policies. Churchill agreed the plan. He was about to travel from a heavily fortified Westminster to France to sign the Act of Union when he learned of the French government's surrender.
The news from France is very bad, and I grieve for the gallant French people who have fallen into this terrible misfortune.
De Gaulle was spirited from France. Churchill had him flown to England in a plane he'd sent over specially to rescue the French leader.
When de Gaulle flew out of France in 1940 in that tiny little aeroplane, you know, my grandfather wrote that in that aeroplane carried the honour of France. And all the romance of my grandfather's relationship, my grandfather's very profound relationship with France, a country whose peoples and the country of whom he greatly loved, all that was kind of sort of bound up in this very complicated relationship with the general.
De Gaulle took Joan of Arc's Cross of Lorraine as his symbol. He believed he embodied the spirit of France. Although he'd been provided by Churchill with elegant headquarters near Westminster, his relations with the British were prickly from the start.
De Gaulle, of course, was absolutely determined that he wasn't going to be swamped, that the honour of France was going to be maintained. And so you had this terribly complicated, difficult relationship during the war, at which time General de Gaulle literally drove my grandfather mad, with rage and anger on occasions.
Je crois que c'était des explosions de colère. Ils étaient colériques, assez colériques l'un et l'autre, et à certains moments, leur colère explosait. De Gaulle et Churchill, au fond, avaient le même caractère. Et par conséquent, il était normal qu'ils se heurtent.
De Gaulle's demanding behaviour once caused Churchill to remark, "The greatest cross I have to bear is the cross of Lorraine." De Gaulle's fear was that Churchill was conspiring with the American President Franklin Roosevelt against the interests of his beloved France. De Gaulle's view of those he called the Anglo-Saxons would affect future French leaders and damage his wartime dealings with Churchill. After Paris was liberated in 1944, de Gaulle invited Churchill to ride down the Champs-Élysées with him.
At the end of the war, you know, their relationship, Le Grand Churchill, de Gaulle called him, and their relationship mellowed, but I don't think they were ever blood brothers.
Vive Churchill! Vive l'Angleterre! Vive la France! Vive la France!
Churchill's statue stands just down the Champs-Élysées from General de Gaulle's. The general was to be called back to power in the 50s, and his almost mythical presence still looms large in Anglo-French relations.
First thing from which there is literally no escape if you're a British Foreign Secretary is the fact that the official residence of the British Foreign Secretary at 1 Carlton Gardens was the official residence of General de Gaulle during the war. And down by the gents' lavatories in the semi-basement of 1 Carlton Gardens are the pictures of de Gaulle outside the residence that we lent him during the war. I think that in contemporary terms, a great many of the difficulties that are faced in the relationship go back to the profoundly different experiences that we had in the war, with quotes Britain standing alone and quotes France capitulating and surrendering to the Germans.
You must understand that the national pride of the French was deeply wounded in World War II, which been occupied, and the regime, the Vichy regime, collaborated with Hitler. And for us, not as individuals but as country, it's probably a shame which marked us. And this is why, after World War II, we took the initiatives in order to reconciliate with the Germans, to build an axis, a couple, between France and Germany. And the history of the common market, of the Union, started there. And Great Britain stayed out.
The Second World War had impressed on successive British governments the virtues of our island status. As Churchill put it to de Gaulle, faced with a choice between Europe and the open sea, Britain will always choose the open sea. It would rather strengthen our links with America and the Commonwealth than tie our fortunes to those unreliable French.